Hey there, in this video, I'm going to be showing all of the things that I processed in our kitchen the second week of November 2024. The first thing I did was I took out my electric pressure canner that Steve had gotten me for Christmas last year. I haven't used it yet and I'm really excited to try it. So I thought I would experiment with this 5 to 6 pounds of stew beef that I had gotten from Costco. There's a few different methods on how to pressure can stew meat, but I'm going to be using this one out of the Ball Book Guide to Preserving, and it's very straightforward, super easy. I'm just going to go ahead and get that warmed up in this large stock pot by getting the beef in there and then covering it with just enough water to cover the top. And then bringing that up to a very low simmer just to warm the meat through. I'm not trying to cook it or anything. While that is coming up to temperature, I decided that I'm going to go ahead and can up some Cowboy candy using the diced jalapenos that I chopped up in the last video. I wasn't exactly sure how much jalapenos I had, so I measured them on my kitchen scale and got pretty much half of what the recipe calls for. So I just took all the ingredients and added half of that to this very small stock pot. So we have apple cider vinegar, sugar, salt, turmeric, mustard seed, and cayenne pepper. And then my friend Mandamu had commented on one of our videos recently asking about my garlic peeler that I had shown a while ago, and I had forgotten about it. So I got it out. It had come originally as a set that I had gotten on Amazon. It had this garlic press and this garlic peeler. The garlic press was terrible. It ended up bending and was just awful, and I had to throw it away. But this is the garlic peeler that came with it, and I really like it. It works well with older garlic, so if it's fresh garlic out of the garden, it will not peel the garlic very easily. But with this stuff that I had harvested from our garden back in July, it peeled it really, really well and saved me time and my hands. I will be using that to get all of the garlic peeled and frozen, probably in the next video. Back over to the meat. It is starting to warm up a little bit, and at the same time, the jalapenos syrup is boiling. That takes like 15 minutes or so to cook down. So I went ahead and I added all of those diced up jalapenos to that and got it mixed up and let that come to a boil. Now I need to get lids ready. I'm going to be water bath canning the Cowboy candy using regular mouth jelly jars, but then I also need wide mouth for the quart size jars that I'm going to be canning the meat up in the pressure canner with. So I just add this baby bottle safe dish soap and get those washed up in some hot water. And just bounce between the jalapenos and the beef. I don't want the beef to start really cooking on the stove, so I go ahead and turn the burner down even further and then start getting them added to the jars. And it's kind of tricky to do that because the meat gets stuck in the funnel, so I had to keep pushing it down and then adding enough liquid to bring the headspace to within 1 inch from the top of the jars. To wipe the rims down really well and then get the lids and bands on. Now we get to try out this smart canner. I read the instructions. Both the pressure canners I have, I really like keeping the instructions with it because they are so helpful in step-by-step on how to do it, no matter what it is that you're canning. So having the recipe that you're following in combination with the instruction manual is really the best way to can if you're a little uncertain about what you're doing. And with this brand new canner, I was for sure uncertain about what I was doing. Once I got the jars in, I had to add 8 cups of water and then close the lid. Make sure that the vent pipe on the top was on exhaust. Set it to high, and then the time to process the beef was 90 minutes. So I set the timer to that. The pressure canner is now going to heat up, and once steam starts to leave the vent pipe, it will count down 10 minutes. So while the automatic pressure canner was starting to work, I decided to can up the Cowboy candy. If you're interested in how to make this Cowboy candy, I have a video on our playlist showing how I do it. I will have that link down in the description below. Then the Cowboy candy processes for 15 minutes. As I was getting ready to put the Cowboy candy into the water bath canner, the electric pressure canner beeped very, very loudly. It almost sounds like a fire alarm. That's how loud of a pitch the beeping is, which is good because it gets your attention. It beeped to let me know that it is steaming out the top and that the timer is now going to be counting down 10 minutes of just letting steam vent out the vent pipe. Once the pressure canner has vented the steam for 10 minutes, it beeps again to let me know that it's time to turn the vent pipe from exhaust to airtight. Once the pressure starts to build up inside the pressure canner, the timer will start to go. The timer will then hit 90 minutes and count down from there. So a few minutes later, the Cowboy candy was done, and I was able to turn off that water bath canner and get the jars onto a towel on our countertop. And then about an hour and a half later, the pressure canner was almost done and we got down to the 0, and I immediately unplugged it from the wall. And then I just let it sit there for a really long time. I have my thoughts already on what I didn't like at this point with this electric pressure canner. I did not like the fact that I was going to have to wait a while before I was going to be able to open up the canner. I like with my regular Presto pressure canner, once the pressure gauge is down to 0, I just have to wait for the safety button to pop down, and then it's going to be safe for me to open up the top of the pressure canner. But with this one, there is no, and I'll have to check the instructions again, but there's no safety button that I could see. So I wasn't really sure when exactly it was going to be safe for me to open the pressure canner. I did end up waiting like an hour before I moved the vent pipe over to exhaust to see if any steam would come out, and it didn't. So I knew that it was going to be safe for me to open. So far, I'm not noticing anything weird about it. The jars are boiling. It looks like that there may have been a little bit of liquid loss. I had done a 1-inch headspace on all of these jars, and it looks like it fell a little bit below that, which isn't abnormal. And then as I was moving them to the towel, I started to notice the liquid loss. I decided to let them cool off on the towel for a little bit before I evaluated them again to see what the seals were like and if I was going to move any of them to the refrigerator. I ended up putting the 2 jars that had some significant liquid loss. I ended up, after they cooled off, putting them in our refrigerator to be eaten within the next few days because I could not for sure guarantee that the lids were safely sealed. Even if the lids were on there safely, the amount of liquid that was lost was going to shorten the shelf life. I figured it was just safer just to get them into the refrigerator and then just use them in a meal that week, which I ended up doing. And the other 2 seemed fine and totally normal, nothing wrong. And for the most part, all of the liquid was still in there. And I ended up just labeling everything and they all went into our pantry. The next day, I decided to go through my cookbooks and I grabbed my Homestead Kitchen cookbook that was written by Eve and Ivan Kilcher from Alaska, The Last Frontier, that TV show on Discovery. And she has a sourdough, a very basic sourdough starter. Every time I've made this, I either have great luck with it or I have horrible luck with it. And it's mostly because our house is a little on the drafty side. There really is nowhere for me to put these to stay in a consistently warm spot when we don't have our wood stove going just yet. I grabbed 1 cup of lukewarm water from our tap along with 1 cup organic rye flour, and I mixed them all together in this wide mouth mason jar with cheesecloth on top and a jar band around the cheesecloth on top to just let air flow, and we just let that sit there for 3 to 5 days before I can use it. So we'll see how that turns out probably in the next video because I'm going to be letting that sit for a little bit. On this day, I was going to be planting our garlic out into our garden, and I had to break apart all of the cloves of garlic that I had saved for seed garlic. I had already separated out what I was going to be keeping for eating, and that's all stored in our kitchen. But the rest of this I need to break up so that I can plant it in the garden. And then I also have these shallots too that I need to separate. I will link the video of us starting garlic here if you're interested. Then I also had to sort through our final harvest of tomatoes that I had harvested a couple of weeks ago. And there's just still a ton of green tomatoes in here. And we're almost all the way through all of it. Anything that's turning red, I'm freezing at this time because it's just not a large enough batch to really make anything out of. So I'm just freezing most of the red tomatoes that I get. So that's kind of going to be it for this video. It wasn't really a super exciting week. I wanted to try out the electric pressure canner. I like some things about it and I don't like other things. I kind of just had wished at that point that I went ahead and used my regular Presto pressure canner. But I'm glad that I've tried it and I do want to try it again. I had, bought that beef knowing that there was a risk that I might have an issue with it. I don't know. I think I still need to practice with it to figure out the settings, or maybe there's a different method that I could use to can up the beef that might work a little bit better in the electric pressure canner. Maybe raw pack or something else. I don't know. I have to look into it. Next week, I will hopefully be able to share what we did with the sourdough or how the sourdough turned out. And that is going to do it with this video. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye.